Dallas Holm here once again with Here We Are podcast. So glad you're back with us. I think this is our third in this series that Keith and I have been doing together. You've met Keith Irwin previously, and the other two. We took off our Packer gear, didn't want to offend anybody else too much, but underneath this, kind of like the red S for Superman, there's still Packers. That's right.
Go Pack, go.
So we've really enjoyed sharing about discipleship in particular, and we want to continue on that theme in this podcast, and we might do another one, watch for it. After we stopped last time, Keith and I were talking because we kind of laid out, first of all, the fact that every Christian should be a discipler, what we call the Great Commission, to go into all the world, which we discussed could be cross the ocean, cross street, cross table, share the gospel. But the end game of it all is to make a disciple.
It is.
And that's the part that oftentimes the church, as we say, and individual Christians kind of drop the ball. Evangelism is exciting, getting people into the kingdom, the programs, all that, but the nitty-gritty of rolling up your sleeves, investing the time and the effort that it takes to disciple, to walk someone through. And we talked about some of the various programs like Navigators and Scripture memorization and mentoring and the time it takes. And all those things are great, and we'll continue to discuss that. My concern was that there might still be some people that kind of go, I'm just not wired like that. The specifics, the details, the program. So we were talking about that afterwards, and I just mentioned, in fact, something Keith was saying last time. I was thinking while he was talking of my grandpa, who I think I've referenced in one of the other podcasts with my daughter, but my grandfather, my mother's father, was literally, he and Grandma were like our other set of parents. They always lived a couple blocks from us. Birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, they were always there. He never drove, so we drove them to church. We drove them shopping. They're just very close. My grandpa was a man's man. He had been in the military in World War I. Wow. He had broken wild horses. He had been a boxer for a while. He worked in a meat packing plant forever. He was an outdoorsman extraordinaire, hunted, fished, trapped, provided for his family by those things. So he was kind of my hero. Godly man. He got saved in his 30s, I believe. And from the time he became a Christian in his 30s to the time he died in his early 80s, he had read the Bible through over 100 times. He just always read Scripture. But he did preach sermons too. It wasn't like he was this wonderful, godly man. And we were talking, I realized that he was discipling me, not so much by words, though he certainly shared about the Lord, but when I finally became a Christian, I didn't have to go to a book and look up, okay, what's a disciple? I had seen a disciple, a true disciple, in the character and quality of his life lived out before me from the time I was a little kid, through my rebellious years, on into the years when I became a Christian. I'm so glad he was still around, probably about 2 years after I became a Christian. And then we would have some of those conversations. So I want to talk a little more about that. If you asked my grandpa, and I can only presume here, but were you a discipler? I don't know that he'd say, oh yes. I don't think he necessarily saw himself as what we would think of as someone who disciples men or disciples women. But I realize he most certainly was, and I think that's important to address.
Oh, it is. In what you've described, Dallas, is a lifestyle, so to speak. You saw Christ in your grandpa's lifestyle.
Right.
So he walked, talked, discipled you without taking the Bible and going, let's memorize these scriptures together, or this is what I believe and why I believe it. And so that's another most important aspect of discipleship. In my own life, there's examples of me having a friendship with another family, and our family with their family, and before long we began to vacation together, and you do life together. And I call it gaining the right to speak into another man's life. But this one man that I'm thinking about, it took a couple of years of us doing life and having lifestyle together before he asked me, Why are you the way that you are? And what makes you tick, so to speak? And so it gave me the opportunity, coming alongside of him, sharing our lives together, raising our kids together, to explain to him, well, 1 Peter 3:15 says, be ready always to give an answer to anyone who asks you what the hope is that's in you, and do it with gentleness and reverence. And so I gained the opportunity to speak into this man's life, and was able to lead him to the Lord, his wife to the Lord, and baptize his kids out at Timberline in a swimming pool, back in the days of Prairie Creek. And so that is what your grandfather did. That is a lifestyle discipleship, whether you realize it or not. And it doesn't have to be, we're talking about life on life. We're talking about taking time and vacations. But discipleship can be something as simple as when you get ready to be checked out, let's say at Walmart or Lowe's, and you look at her name tag or his name tag, and you ask him, call him by name, and you might say something as simple as, how long you been on your feet? Well, I'm 10 hours into a 12-hour shift. I hope you make it through the next 2 hours, and it's sunny outside. And let me say a quick prayer for you. Well, it blows them away to begin with.
Right.
There's people in line. It doesn't have to be our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You don't have to go into that kind
Let's
of prayer.
kneel down together.
Yes, dearly beloved. All we have to do is say, God, I pray that I thank you for. I'm going to make up a name. Thank you for Mary giving me her service and checking my groceries today. Let her sustain her for 2 more hours, God, and let her enjoy the weather outside when she gets off. It's amazing. It's like every person to me has D-I-M-T-Y stamped right across their forehead. Dimty. Do I matter to you?
Yeah.
And so they're crying out all across our world, do I matter to you? And discipleship is telling people, you matter to me. And so one phase of discipleship is recognizing, those lifestyle moments that come to us.
And that reminds me of it. I know that you and I have talked about it, and I probably mentioned this quote here because it's one of my favorite Oswald Chambers quotes. When he says, there's always one more fact in the other person's life about which you know nothing. So you translate that into just what you're saying. People that we interact with on a daily basis, we can just walk by them, have that brief interaction with the assumption that, well, they're just living life, they're doing okay. No, we face people every day whose lives are a mess. They're literally dying inside. Their marriages are falling apart. They don't know how they're going to pay their bills. Yeah. We did this once. We've done it more than once. But, I'll just confess, the first time that I sat at a table in a restaurant, and the man I was with, a minister and a great discipler, turned and asked the waitress, no, we're going to pray in a few moments. Here's anything we can pray about. And I'm kind of sitting there going, because I'm not a real... People wouldn't think that because they think of me, they've seen me on stage in front of thousands of people. I'm a pretty quiet, laid back. I'd much rather sit in the back row than be at the front. So that's a stretch for me to engage, to reach out, to take that step. That's something I really have to work at and discipline. So when this man did that, I'll confess inside of me, it's like, ooh, this is kind of, and boy, she just said, oh, yeah, I'm they're letting me go here at this job, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I got 2 kids, and on it went. Yeah. It meant so much to her. Yeah. So we're at a restaurant some months later, my wife and I kind of mustered up with him, and and this gal that's waiting on us, she, not that this, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, as they say, but she was all tattooed up. I'm not making any kind of statement about that, but just some of the signs. She just looked weary. She looked hard. We'd observed her with some other customers. She wasn't having a good day. So I thought, well, first of all, maybe she's not the one to ask this question to, but then I thought, no, she's probably exactly the one to ask this question. So I just launched out and said, after she took her order, I said, in just a moment when our food comes, we're Christians, we're going to pray over our food. Is there anything we can... She just broke. Yes. Hard as she was, and she kind of let us know, well, there's this and there's this. And yes. I almost had to make a list. But it showed me that just in that moment, who knows when she had that degree of specific, personalized, intense ministry offered to her, not in a church setting, not preaching a sermon, not, well, let's open up the scriptures here. No. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But discipleship is not just about those things, and it doesn't often it shouldn't always happen in the church. It needs to happen just as well outside the church walls in our interactions with people every day. So it's even learning some of these little keys, like you say, just every person, including ourselves, we all have needs. We're sitting here right now. I know you've got needs in your life. I've got needs in my life, things we're praying about. Yeah. Well, everybody does. So there we are, a Christian with the words of life and the hope of eternity, standing in front of someone that may be lost as a goose, as we used to say. Don't we have some responsibility to take that opportunity, or at least explore the opportunity?
More than ever. In our world, our culture, and what's happening, more than ever, the urgency of the hour of the gospel needs to be there. And that's all discipleship is. In its nutshell, it's sharing what God has done for you. Every last one of us, every one of you out there, have a story. And your story is unique. Nobody else has your story but you. And so people all around us, all day long, they just are crying out, does anybody really care? Do I matter to you? That dimty, that I picture that's stamped right across everybody's forehead. It's funny, not funny, it's by design. You should mention that. Just this morning at our, quote, hometown restaurant, Petty's, I asked the waitress right before we get ready to pray over our breakfast, is there anything we can pray about? Lo and behold, she's like, yeah, my son. So we had special prayer. We get through, she's teared up. Yeah. Just because we showed that we care enough to ask, and so, and how long did it take? Yeah. That long, just to ask her.
Well, and we assume, I think, we just assume that everybody, well, they've got friends. We understand that we interact with a lot of people who probably aren't Christians, but there's sort of almost an unstated assumption that, well, they've got their relationships, they've got people that are helping them, they've got people to walk through.
They don't.
They don't. A lot
and they're
of them
broken, they're hurting, their hearts are aching and longing for the truth, longing for the gospel, longing for hope in our world of hopelessness, The hope of glory is the hope. So,
and oftentimes that's I guess I would say that's kind of is that discipleship in its whole? No, not really, but it's kind of it's an introduction. It can be, it should be, an introduction to open the door for someone to have the opportunity to be discipled. Now, whether you're the person, let's say this waitress you talk to, she tears up, she's had an experience, something she can't quite put her finger on. Is she going to come seek you out, or would it even be appropriate that she should seek you out? Maybe not. We're very much men on men, women on women in these things. But at least now she's had an experience that is perhaps unlike anything she's had the rest of the day, or maybe the rest of her life. Yeah. So isn't it feasible that she might now seek out what is this spiritual thing and find someone? Maybe she'll go to a church. It's at least an introduction to what discipleship looks like and feels like and is. It is part of the discipling process. It's not the whole picture of discipleship. But I think that's what we're trying to help. Not that we're assuming you don't know. It's something we have to refresh in our own lives. Discipleship can happen with anybody at any time, in any situation. It's not just this. If someone comes along with a neat little package that says, this is the 10 steps of discipleship, okay, read it, digest it, but understand, no, that's not the whole thing, probably.
Yeah, this whole thing, I call it, what am I doing? Sowing seeds of discipleship.
Right.
Okay, so that little bitty interaction is a seed that has been sown and can grow, and we don't know when or where God might fertilize it, water it, prune it, develop it into this person seeking someone to mentor her or to mentor him. So very, very important, very, very, pertinent step in what we would call or consider discipleship is this. Okay, my life can be one of discipleship without us sitting down with the Bible.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're going to do another one of these. You notice Keith's T-shirt has the word Shamgar. We were actually talking before we turned the camera on about Shamgar and about discipleship, and just the little bit he shared, it's like, oh, that's really good. For any of you who are saying, well, you haven't really opened up the Bible much. Well, we have, actually, maybe not physically, but this is the heart of God. But specifically, this Old Testament character we're going to talk about in our next one. But until then, thank you Again, Keith Irwin, if you want to know anything more about his ministry, Keith Irwin, IRWIN Ministries. You can go to his website. You know ours is DallasHolm.com. And again, we encourage you, any topics you want discussed, anything, you say, oh, I wish there were more music on your podcast. We're planning on doing a little more of that. But please let us know what you would like to see on these podcasts. Let us know what you think of them. If you're, like, why are you doing that? They're worthless. We know they're not. But let us know what you think. And until next time, we thank you again for watching us on the Here We Are podcast. We'll have more coming your way. Until then, God bless you. See y'all later.
See ya.